So with no further ado, I'd like to invite our guests to join the chat. Today, we're joined by an incredible group who have offered to share their insight with us. We have Evan Jones, who's a producer at Stitch Media, Michael Masukawa, who's the Director of Strategy and Business Development at Secret Location, and Director Nyla Innuksuk. And I will pass it off to our moderator for this session, Kim Gibson, who's the Program Consultant for Interactive Digital Media at Ontario Creates. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us.
Excellent. Thanks, Katie. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, we do have a fantastic group of panelists here and a great topic, a very deep topic with lots of potential avenues for discussion. Unfortunately, we only have about 45 minutes plus 15 minutes for Q&A. So we're not going to be able to delve too deeply into this, but we will try to sort of skim the surface and give you some insights into building audience in the world of digital. And that's one thing that, regardless of where you're coming from, those of you on the other side of this panel watching may not be well versed in the world of digital. But I think one of the things that the digital world has in common with any content creation space is audience. We all want audience. And when I think about audience, I often think about that statement. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? And I think it is very fair to say that nobody wants to be that tree. So we're going to talk about ways to tease out your audience, find your audience, engage with your audience in the world of digital. I have a whole bunch of questions for our panelists, but before we delve into the specific questions, I'm going to do a quick roundtable. And sorry, panelists, this wasn't on my initial plan, but I thought we would have some bios from you. But I'm going to get each of you to do a really quick introductory statement into who you are, what you do, and what your company is all about. So just based on your arrangement on the screen, we're going to start with Evan.
Okay, on the spot.
Evan, I think we need to unmute. There we go.
Yeah, I've got it. The quick version is that I've been running Stitch Media for the past 13 years now, and it is a company that specializes in telling stories with new technology, and that has taken us through so many different platforms, web and mobile, and now games. And we really started early on as being the kind of company that would work with a lot of other IP, a lot of other entertainment properties, and so we collaborate with film and television producers much of the time. And now we have started to build into developing our own IP. We're releasing games. This year we released on Steam, and we're releasing on VR. And so a bunch of different game titles that I'm happy to talk about.
Fantastic. And then we're going to move over to Michael. Can you let us know a little about who you are and what you do at Secret Location?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this panel today. I am Director of Strategy and Business Development at Secret Location, which covers a lot of different things, from just observing the entire immersive entertainment industry and trying to advise on what we should do. Should we do more at-home VR games, location-based VR games, augmented reality, kind of those kinds of things, and just kind of trying to be an expert of the market. My specific role covers a lot of distribution for our content. So I always try to figure out how can our content reach customers, get monetized, and how can we try to make our money back for what we put into the games. Involves a lot of pitching, a lot of creating pitch decks, both kind of to convince people internally that we should do a project, to pitch to external companies for potential financing. And yeah, just kind of connecting with other content creators and trying to see where, how we can work with kind of outside talent and bring that all in-house. So Secret Location is a company that's been around for many years. When I joined in 2017, it was after the E1 acquisition. So we had kind of started moving away from service work, which was, we did a Sleepy Hollow VR project, which won the first Emmy in VR. That was a project we did for Fox for that TV show. We worked with the LA Philharmonic, lots of other companies, but around that time, we shifted more for making original IP. And that's where the Canada Media Fund and Ontario Creates, formerly OMDC, as we remember, has been very helpful in supporting our efforts. So, in part, a lot of our success comes from you guys. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. And Nyla, your turn.
Sure. I mean, I hate this part, but I actually think I prefer this over having someone read my bio while I sit here. So I guess I'm kind of on the other side of things a little. I'm a writer and director, and I kind of work within a couple of different mediums, with interactive kind of being a really big love and passion of mine. And so I've worked for companies where I've developed, where we've kind of done service stuff. I tend to kind of work on my own stuff these days, and then work with different partners like the National Film Board, or I'm working with the Winnipeg Art Gallery and some different kinds of partners to kind of put things together. And yeah, so I kind of am, I also do 2D, I guess, like normal movies and stuff like that. So it's kind of nice for me to kind of be able to sometimes be able to exist kind of in a world, and then be able to kind of build these characters and worlds, and then spend some time in the 2D world, and then spend some time in that space within like a comic space or within, and then using augmented reality or VR or whatever it is to kind of tell the story in a different way. And it might be a totally different kind of, and really the ways that these kinds of, the technology really is such a big part of the story in this case.
Yeah, so technology, stories are stories. You can tell them on different platforms using different technology and different applications, tools, but they're ultimately still content. So that's one of the things that we have in common. Before we sort of start teasing out audience related questions, I am going to ask the panelists to sort of give us a really quick overview of what the typical value chain looks like in the world of interactive. And I think we'll probably primarily focus on the game and the VR space, just based on the panelists' level of sort of expertise. So what does that look like in the game space, Evan, and where are we at with respect to video games?
Well, I mean, we all started with what we would call a premium model right now, which would be, you fall in love with the marketing message for a game and you purchase the game one time and you own it forever. And that went from physical copies of games that we would buy to now digital distribution. And so we're very much in the world of digital distribution at this point. So almost all of our games are being sold online and sign up for, the transactions happen digitally. The gravity of that is that we are using all of these different storefronts, and each storefront seems to have its own rhythm, where it has this entry point where a lot of premium games will appear, and then people will start to price point each other as a competitive advantage. And so, I mean, the natural progression is that, I'll buy one game for $20, but maybe I'll think twice about this game that's $10. And that progression is just a natural piece of the ecosystem, that all of these digital distribution hubs allow you to do dynamic pricing, and people are constantly dealing with sales and constantly like working on what that price point is by experimenting with it almost in real time. So that's the premium model. But what it has created is the next level, which is the freemium model, which is then, how much of this game do we need to give you for free before you're willing to commit and say, now at this point, I've fallen in love with the game that I'm already playing, and I'm willing to be a paying customer to unlock something in respect. But then after freemium comes the obvious free to play, which is that the whole game's free. Everything's free all the time. And that's where we're really in the more mature spaces like the App Store for iOS, is that like free to play is the way to go. And all the dominant games are at that model, which means that you have to find value elsewhere, whether that's advertising or some way of in-game upgrades. There's all kinds of ways to monetize that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd love to drift off of
I was going to throw to you on the VR space. What does that look like? I mean, a lot of the stuff that you have created at Secret Location has been game-based content. So how does that parallel what you're seeing?
Yeah. Just to drift off something Evan was just saying, we also, when we joined E1, we built the World of Peppa Pig mobile app. So the other kind of model, similar to freemium, is more we offer I think it's a free 7-day trial for parents to subscribe to the World Peppa Pig app, download it on an iPad or a phone, show it to their kids, see if their kids love the content, and then you become a subscriber, monthly subscriber, and you could kind of buy it all at a discounted rate if you want to buy like 12 months or 6 months or something like that, or you just pay monthly. So a lot of parents right now are, maybe weren't planning to homeschool their kids, but now they are due to, COVID and classrooms being closed and all that stuff. So, we're going to try to update the Peppa app and make it even more educational, add some more content in there just to kind of bring more value to parents and kids and what they're trying to do right now. So, so I kind of look at the mobile space being something where very much people expect to download something for free, test it out, and then maybe they pay, maybe they don't, or you calculate that you'll have a couple customers where, they might spend $200 on in-app purchases, whereas, the majority of people are going to pay for free. So there's lots of different ways to kind of model out how you could make money with a mobile game. So during COVID, just kind of game usage has shot up across the board, from console video games to mobile to VR to everything. So I'd say right now kind of VR started off as being something that was a little harder to get because you needed a premium PC to run it, and you have to plug the headset into the PC, have the room to set up these sensors, and it was kind of more of a hardcore gamers market. That has changed with the release of the Oculus Quest system that came out a year ago last May. They just announced that they're coming out with the second version of that headset this October, and I've, full disclosure, I've pre-ordered one of myself because I used to be able to go into the office and play VR and didn't need to own headsets myself, but now that I haven't since March. Oh, awesome, nice. Evan has one, so yeah, I'm gonna get the Quest 2 for myself, and I'm looking forward to that. So
sounds like a nice little treat, and it sounds like the monetization options for games, VR, digital properties are quite varied. And Evan, you've sort of described the evolution of premium to freemium to free to play. And while that is the evolution, the reality is that all of those models still exist and they're still in play. And it depends on your product and it depends on your strategy, which way you decide to go. Now, Nyla, before we started this session, we were talking a little bit about how things have changed in the world of digital and the VR space. What's your perspective on this stuff? What are you seeing happening from where you're sitting?
Yeah, well, from where I'm sitting, I can see my Oculus Quest, and I think that's like, it's a pretty, that this is like, that it has kind of changed the game a little, but I think that VR has always been really hard to monetize. And the fact that you need this expensive piece of hardware that gets updated, that, once you get one, then next year there's always going to be one that's better and has less latency and all of these things. So it is, I think that the fact that a lot of that people are talking about how to make money through advertisements in mobile and that kind of thing is very telling about kind of just the way things are right now. And certainly with, like I've got a project that's kind of is shifted to an augmented reality, but it is headset based project, and it's a difficult sell, and it's not something that, and the only reason that it kind of works for us is because it's going to be in installation based, and we've got a big set of locations that have said, okay, that have audiences that go through that have said, okay, we can set it up here. So there's like, we know that there's going to be eyeballs getting on this without having to rely on people buying technology. And then even then, as soon as the pandemic happens and these ideas of sharing hardware and headsets, then immediately the first thing is, okay, then what can we do with augmented reality and in public space with the thing that everybody has which is their phone. So it's a lot of these things. When we talk about the audience, it is about so much of it has changed. But this idea, I remember, I know it's like one of the very last questions, but I think it's so helpful to learn from kind of painful mistakes. And I remember, you know, maybe in 2015 or something, my friend Dan Beckerman, who's a producer of 2D movies, he had a project that, you know, that was the director was excited to turn it into a VR project instead of a 2D movie. And it has kind of these stars attached. And so then it's like, okay, well, how can we make this happen? But it was just like, you know, nobody had headsets in 2015. Oculus just had developer kits at that point. So it was like the idea of the investors were like, okay, but how do you make money? And it was just like, you know, that was kind of the biggest struggle. So it's so interesting to see kind of how it's changed so much.
Yeah, and so we've seen the market has sort of come a long way for VR, absolutely. And it's still emerging and still shifting and still changing. And things like COVID pop up and can have a radical impact on these kind of spaces. We've already teased out some of the challenges associated with working in sort of digital and with digital content. I'm going to throw a few more things on the table with respect to audience, because I think there's maybe somewhat of a misperception that it is the gold rush and that it's easy to make money in the digital space, in the game space, in VR. It's, you know, money, money, money floating everywhere. And that's not indeed the case. And finding audiences can be particularly difficult. And there are a few things that I see that are obstacles that get in the way. There's fragmentation. Finding your audience across multiple channels is really tough and challenging. There's saturation. There's lots of content out there. How do you get your content in front of an audience? There's the competition, the fact that there are large players who may already have a toehold and sort of captured a market, and you can't sort of wiggle your way in there. How do you see these things affecting your business, Evan?
Heavily. I mean, you've hit all of the challenges. I mean, the number that I like.
Oh, no, that's only a couple. There's lots more.
Yeah, not to mention the technical problems. But I mean, the big stat that I often scare people with is that, you know, right now the current trend is that we're seeing 10,000 games entering just the Steam marketplace each year. And one of the reasons is because it is so available to do global digital distribution, you know, and the quality of those games varies, obviously, in the 10,000, but you would be shocked at how many of those 10,000 are incredibly good games, you know, picking them at random. And so when you know that the average consumers are buying, what, 10 games a year, maybe, like, you know, what's a reasonable amount of games that people would buy each year? You're looking at a huge power curve when it comes to like which games are going to become, and unfortunately, one of the challenges is these algorithmic curation systems really say like, well, this one's selling really well. I mean, you look at things like Fall Guys, for example, which is like the hit of this month. It has done incredibly well for being a great game, but it also has been playing the algorithm, which is that it got a lot of traction and then it started using that traction to like rise to the top of the storefronts, because one of the first things you want to do is like be at the top of the storefronts. And there are different ways to do that by defining what the storefront is for you, because you know, you can't always be the AAA game that's going to be like at the top of the bestseller charts, but you can find ways to redefine like people who are looking for this type of game, people who are looking for something unusual or different is a way to differentiate yourself that way. But you're right, not only do we have, you know, 11 different storefronts that we're trying to service all at the same time, we're trying desperately to bring our community back together into one space, like a Discord channel or something, so that we can actually have one touch point when we do want to push an update or say that we've got another game, you know. And so you're doing a ton of brand building to be able to keep your current game and your future games in people's minds when they make a decision about where they're going to put their money.
Yeah, and Michael, Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's just daunting. That's all.
It is, yeah. Yes. And Michael, I'm assuming you're seeing that as well. And I mean, you talked about some of the other challenges, and I think Nyla talked about it as well, is the low adoption rate when you are maybe a few steps ahead of your audience. Michael, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so the good thing about the Quest, Oculus Quest ecosystem is that, you know, it's a brand new headset, right? It's been out for a little bit less than a year. Many developers have complained that Oculus takes a pretty heavy-handed approach at curating that store list. So all the titles that are on the Rift did not, you know, the PC VR headset did not make it onto the Quest. So that standalone headset has a bit of a smaller store. Also, you know, technically it's a less powerful headset. So we still would have to version our games before putting it on there, and that requires extra budget and time. But that said, so there is less competition currently on the Quest. So that does help, you know, being lost in a sea of all the titles on Steam VR. So that does help. So if we do, you know, get a title onto the Quest, it'll be a little easier to find us. You know, so I do, you know, just to take Oculus's point of view for a moment, like, I understand that with this new headset, this is their chance to bring VR to many people for the first time, and they want people to download an experience, love it, pick up their headset again, buy another experience, love it, and so on and so forth. They don't want someone to play a dud and then say, okay, I'm done with VR, and just put it down and play their Nintendo Switch, right? Which is, you know, probably a lot easier to start up and play. So that's kind of why I think they're kind of taking this approach to curating the story really tightly. So anyway, so that's kind of one way I see the future. You know, kind of, you know, hopefully being in the in interest of developers for PlayStation VR as well. That's also the largest kind of VR market at the moment. They also have a pretty curated approach, and it's hard to get onto the PlayStation VR store unless you hit certain technical requirements and have a game that, you know, meets their quality standards. So those are kind of the two, you know, objectively most you know, largest opportunities to monetize your games in VR at the moment. So yeah. So.
Great. Okay. I know, Nyla, you are working on some of your own projects and conceiving and getting them off the ground on your own. They're your own projects. You own them. When do you start thinking about audience?
Oh, like right away. But I think, yeah. And then sometimes I own them, and then sometimes I don't. And so it's, yeah, but I think the audience has to kind of be, I mean, exactly what we're talking about is it's really hard to kind of get people to kind of engage with your stuff. So it has to, that has to be kind of front and center. And then, but for me, it's, I also come from a bit of a different perspective too, because I'm, as an Indigenous person, I sometimes make Indigenous stuff. And so I also have an audience an audience that I want to reach that's a little inaccessible. And so when I'm kind of thinking about this stuff, even kind of anything that would be streaming on YouTube, for instance, like all of that stuff is just a lot harder to access in the kind of remote communities or where I'm from, which is Nunavut, and internet's just really expensive. And there's not the same kind of institutions and places where people can go and just access some of this kind of stuff. Like I've had things at the TIFL Lightbox where we can just have people that are coming in and can kind of engage with the space or with galleries and things like that. We kind of have these spaces where people can come and maybe try out technology that they wouldn't be able to kind of purchase themselves. So I'm also kind of thinking about how do we get, we build partnerships to kind of get some of this stuff into these communities. And a big part of that is things like Imaginative, which is an amazing institution now. It was a film festival, and now they have year-round programming. And part of what they do is try and get Indigenous film, but then also digital media into Indigenous communities. And they partner with different kinds of organizations as well to kind of to build that infrastructure. And so it's kind of a work in progress, but it's really nice to have these partnerships where you're not kind of having to reinvent the wheel every time, and starting to build a bit of this alternative distribution model that does require its own budget and maybe kind of coincides alongside that.
And Michael, you sort of mentioned some of the partners that you were working with, Oculus. What kind of roles do partners play for Secret Location when you're trying to reach an audience?
Yeah, so as Evan said, visibility on these digital storefronts is everything. If people log into the storefront, see your game there, that's a huge advantage versus if they have to search for your game. So primarily it will be whether we get to participate in sales, summer, winter sales, and get our games featured that way. If we get to do some kind of like Secret Location content bundle where you could download, you could buy Transpose, Great Sea, and Blasters all for 40% off or something like that. That's, we do really well when that happens. As a consumer myself, I know I will just find the games I want to buy, put it on my wish list, and then when I get a notification that's on sale, that's when I go and buy it. So, because as a gamer, there's always more games to play than you have the time for. So I could see.
So how do you get on those storefronts?
A lot of them. Well, Steam is very open. Just allows you to publish. You just follow all the guidelines and you publish it yourself. Oculus is very curated. You have to submit kind of a pitch deck and say, this is the concept. This is why we want to put it on the Quest. Here's our plan for it and whatnot. And then they can approve you or not. Luckily we do have an Oculus developer relations contact since we've been putting content on their headsets, for more than 3 years. So we have someone to kind of work with us and guide us through that process and help, make sure we're putting our best foot forward. So that helps a lot. PlayStation VR, so each kind of has their own kind of separate requirements. You just have to see, does your game meet those technical requirements? What do we need to change it to make that work? Just one note on community building around our games. So Blasters of the Universe was a game we released on Steam in early access, so that built some community for the game who could buy the game at a discounted price while we were still making it, essentially. So they could get an early version of the game before it launched for full price. And then soon after I joined the company, we kind of looked at it and said, this could be a fit for the VR arcade market. And so we kind of started with House of VR in Toronto, VR Play-In also in Toronto, a lot of these different places. So we kind of first did some individual VR arcade deals, but then there's also these bigger platforms that service hundreds of VR arcades. So we ended up getting our content on there. And one way to really kind of galvanize interest in the game is we organized a esports tournament. So there's this company called the Virtual Athletics League, who organizes different VR arcades together. And we were actually their first tournament. So just 10 arcades, all competing for high scores. But that was a great kind of way to sign up more arcades for the game, get more interest in it, and get the attendance familiar. So then when new people walk into the VR arcade wanting to play a game, they might recommend Blasters if they ran that tournament or something. So that's actually been very important in the VR arcade world. You need the attendance to know and recommend your game because most people have never done VR before.
It's really interesting to hear you kind of describe it that way, because I remember when Blasters came out, and I think this is the key thing about, and one of the reasons why Secret Location is such a big success is that their Blasters was just really good and fun and playable. And, but then I also remember I played like a game. I don't think that like the kind, and it's certainly when it was being created, there just weren't it was just one of the best early games that was just like intuitive and made a lot of sense. But I remember trying it out it must have been I think maybe at CFC or something. And then 6 months later, seeing it at House of VR, but it was like a slightly different version. Like it had changed since the last time I played it. And so it was like, oh, this is so much cooler. This makes so much more sense that you can reload now. Like I think in a first version, like you couldn't. And it was just like kind of feeling also as if you were kind of like seeing the development and the kind of changes in community feedback was kind of neat. And then it was just one of these games that was also one of the first on the PlayStation VR, I think. And yeah, it was just kind of neat to see that kind of
So pulling out a couple of things, because there is a really great example of talking about being out first on a platform, like Nyla saying, it's when you're the first ones there, the adoption rate might be low, but you're first in a small field, so you get the opportunity to kind of stand out. Michael, you brought up a couple of other things, which is, in the VR space, you can look at home use. You can also look at out of home use at location-based entertainment centers. And some of that stuff may be radically impacted by what's happening in the world right now with COVID. Talking, sort of flipping back to kind of partners, because I think partners is a really important thing when it comes to finding your audience and realizing that sometimes you need those partnerships to get there. So Michael, you've talked a little bit about sort of, you get on the storefront, you can get there, but you're still possibly buried on the storefront. And how do you get those features, Evans? How do you get on the front of those storefronts? How do you become that project that's featured when you open up these stores?
Oh, just one quick comment, kind of to answer your question also, Nyla's. I think game developers these days are expected to deliver regular updates to their game. So like, you launch, and then it might be even a day later, you have to download a patch because they fixed a bunch of bugs that they discovered. But developers are expected to release, additional levels, content, weapons, whatever it is, depending on the game. So that is one way to get refeatured on these different storefronts. They say when you do a major update, Aqua will be, Last of the Universe now with two new levels, something like that. So so these storefronts are looking for reasons to help you be successful, and one of those definitely is these content updates, whether it's free or maybe it's an in-app purchase. But that's one good way to do it. I'll let Evan go now.
Yeah, Evan, how about
Sure.
because I know you've got some really unique partnerships with your project as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about a bunch of them. Some of them I can't talk about yet because I'm trying to build up more. I mean, one of the big things that we're trying to do right now is to attach sort of a brand name to one of our upcoming projects, so that it can be like brought to you by the people that who did this, and add some star power to our next project. So I'll keep that under wraps until we secure it, but that's a strategy that pulls things from other entertainment. The people who are sitting watching this webinar probably have tons of IP that would translate well to help get that name brand recognition in a storefront. If you see a logo that if you see a star face that something like that. So those are ways to get a little bit more traction. What we're chasing right now is that we are working on our upcoming VR project called Flow Weaver, and we are looking for publishers. And publishers can offer a ton of different services in traditional games, but also now in VR. And there's very few VR publishers out there right now, which some of them would invest money and they buy in and get equity out of the deal. And some of them offer services. So one of them would be, their marketing expertise, because a lot of game studios don't have the in-house marketing teams that they need to build out all that collateral and do the PR and all that stuff. And so they would take that on. Another big thing is localization, which is that their value add would be translating it into simplified Chinese, into Russian. Those are all big markets. Being able to reach those markets in the storefronts all at once gives you a big push. And the last piece of a publisher is that publishers are now becoming like the record labels, where they are curating their own bundles, and because they have other titles that are known, they can help you get recognized as your next title comes through. So they sort of are a seal of approval that consumers will come and look for, and they'll say like, oh, like those awesome guys, they always, and that's literally the name of the publisher, those awesome guys make these games, and that's why I'm going to pick their next game, because they've obviously chosen a great one. So that's one of our goals right now, is to make a game strong enough that we can get it in front of a publisher who says, yes, I'm going to attach my brand to your game, so that when it launches, it is primed for success in a storefront.
Absolutely. Yeah, those partnerships can be key. And you're sort of also, I want to sort of make it a little bit of a step back, because I think, Michael, you brought up community, because I think that's also particularly important, and engaging with your community. And you also talked about updates, and updates is one way to get yourself featured on the store. It's also a great way to engage with your community and to keep people interested. And Nyla is a great example of somebody who noticed one of those community updates. How do you work with community, Michael?
Yeah, to kind of drift off all this, we haven't talked about YouTube influencers. So, you know, there are some out there for VR. Nathy is a good one. Cass and Cherry is another good influencer. But, you know, like for a lot of PC console games, if you get the right influencer to do a let's play of your game, lots of people see it. Then they're going to, you know, add it to their wish list, pre-order the game, whatever. So, tapping into the communities of different kind of virtual influencers, I think, is a very cost efficient and, you know, probably very, very effective way to get your game out there. PR and press is good, but you know, are people who are going to buy your game going to read the article and buy your game, or are they going to watch you know, PewDiePie play it, get scared, and be like, wow, I got to do you know, I got to do this in VR. So yeah, so yes, that's one kind of way to tap into it. Community building is something we're actively working on at Secret Location. And I know at the Epic Game Store, they have kind of weekly free games. And if you download the free game, you have a chance to join kind of the mailing list of that developer. So that's one way to just gather a bunch of email addresses. So then you kind of know, okay, these people really want to hear about our future games. So we haven't done anything like that yet, and Epic Game Store doesn't have VR content on it, but we're looking at lots of different ways to kind of have a greater sense of who our community is and how to reach them. Beyond just, I mean, another way is, you know, in game reviews on the storefront. So whether it's Steam or Oculus, like people will let you know, I love this game. I don't like this one specific thing about the game. I think it's too hard, whatever. So just like, even just being a developer who actually like goes through the comments and responds to the comments, that is one way to kind of interact with your community, build it, show that you care, the kind of about the feedback you're getting.
And there's different levels of community as well. You can have surface level community, but then you can also have those really engaged people who can drive adoption with word of mouth. And those people can be your biggest champions. They can actually really drive sales for you. Nyla, you've talked about audiences that are maybe a little bit more difficult to reach, and some of the challenges that you've had there. What are some of the really positive responses you've had with your content with some of those audiences?
Yeah, I think, well, I think we've all kind of been having these conversations over the past little while about representation and authenticity and what that means. And yeah, so I think that it's when it comes to things like video games and just like nerd culture and stuff, it's important for people to see themselves represented in all these kinds of fun things as well. And so for me, definitely, I've had the chance to work with Marvel. I've developed a superhero with Marvel called Snow Guard, and she's from this community of Pang, which is super tiny, but I just shot a movie there. And it's, I got letters from kids in class, just with questions about this superhero, if she knows how to drive a snowmobile and things like that. And it's really kind of, I think, just those kinds of things are so important because I grew up with video games and comic books and that kind of thing, but never really kind of seeing that kind of authentic representation. And when we talk about the kind of VR world, it's interesting when it comes to perspective, because we're kind of giving people a perspective when we're putting on a headset. So these kinds of things are kind of important discussions to be having, and ones that don't necessarily take place in the tech world in the same way they might in kind of the film space. But yeah, it's definitely exciting to see that these conversations are happening.
Well, I'm just going to take a few, just to pause for a moment, just to let everybody in the audience know that we're getting near the end of the session and we're happy to take your questions. I am going to pose another question to everybody. I think I'm wondering if each of you will just do a really quick roundtable, and hopefully by then we'll have a few questions. If not, I've got plenty more. But I'm really wondering if I want each of you to sort of provide some insight into any opportunities that you see on the horizon that you think people might want to be aware of with respect to digital and having the opportunity to engage with audiences in the digital space. Evan, let's start with you. Sorry, I keep picking up for Evan to make you go first.
That's okay. I'm totally prepared. I mean, opportunities are always this new uncharted territory. So there's a lot of that these days. Like, if we're talking about VR specifically, the Oculus Quest, to Michael's point about it, it was a huge leap away from being tethered into a box or a backpack or something, and being able to set it up, take it to somebody else's house and play it right there. The Quest 2 that just came out 2 weeks ago has now really said, like, this is possible. The proof of concept is now proven, and you're seeing untethered VR change in a huge way. And now that we're dealing with the technology, which allows you to sort of do this inside out tracking with the cameras, we're now bleeding into the AR space. And so we've got, like, all the technical opportunities that I see are about these hybrid experiences where, because you're untethered, you can move much further. You're not stuck to a desk. And so now you can walk through a space that might be meters long, and then also be aware of the things around you, because you're seeing right through the pass-through cameras to be able to identify obstacles and even put things in context. So I think we've got VR coming to a maturity point, which is really nice to see. It's not there, but it's so close. And what's probably going to happen is, as soon as it hits, it'll then immediately, like, transition into the AR space, is my expectation. But I don't know. That's my first answer.
Right. So you're pretty bullish on the VR AR space. Michael, how about yourself?
Oh, I love jumping. So a lot of really great games came out of mods. So Half-Life 2 was a PC game where different people would kind of modify the game, and they came up with what was it called? Sorry, well, now I can't think of the examples.
Was it Gary's mod you're thinking of? Yeah.
Gary's mod. What's the deathmatch one? Team Fortress 2, right, was a Half-Life mod. Counter-Strike was a Half-Life mod. And then for World of Warcraft 3, right, Dota came out of that. League of Legends essentially came off of that. So a lot of really great games that just come from people playing some kind of game that has a robust, like, you could modify the assets, play around with it, and create good stuff. So Half-Life Alyx is a fantastic game that came out more for the premium VR headsets with the Valve Index, which is kind of the most expensive but very premium PC VR headset. And that game has a lot of kind of modding opportunities. So people have recreated other games in VR based on the Half-Life Alyx tools. And I would keep my eye kind of on that space to see who are the talented developers who are modding with Half-Life Alyx and are going to create the next great, fantastic game. Also PUBG, right? That was a mod off of, what's it called, Armus or something like that. So the kind of whole battle royale genre was like a mod off of something else. So anyway, so I just think a lot of innovation, creativity comes from that. And I'm excited to see what people come up with. And the last thing on that note, just coding and becoming a developer is going to get easier over time. Like Epic made a purchase of some company, I think Manticore, right? And they have this technology where you kind of code games within a game. So for me, I had computer science roommates all in college, and they're all doing great. But for anyone who is kind of scared of learning how to code and stuff like that, I think there are just going to be programs that make coding a lot easier in the future. So that's what I'm excited about.
I totally agree. I would point to visual scripting is going to take over. So
excellent. Okay. And Nyla, what are you seeing from where you sit?
Yeah, well, even like visual scripting, when even that kind of thing, making these kinds of things more accessible would be huge, especially with I mean, in Nunavut where there's not even computer science programs built into the public education system. It's like these kinds of things are it's like, you know, it's like speaking a different language, and so. Yeah, I think, and then I also am excited about the future of AR and how that will kind of all evolve. Yeah, very excited about it all. And I mean, yeah, it's so cool, like how quickly the technology is evolving, and even when you kind of would put on the Quest and then you change it to that it's like that you're no longer using the handsets, and it feels like magic, and you can just see where it can go from there.
Yeah, excellent. Well, it's lovely to see everybody's sort of excitement and what you're seeing, and it's everybody seems to have some really positive thoughts on where we're going. We still don't have any questions, so I'm just gonna leave it there. Anybody want anything? I'm just putting that out there. We are happy to take your questions. While we're waiting for those to come in, if they do come in, Nyla kind of hinted that I had a question here, because I agree with you, Nyla. I think talking about your biggest mistake can often be the most very illustrative, and it's a learning opportunity for you, and it's great to be able to share those learning opportunities with other people. So I'm going to ask Evan, from looking at audience and engaging with audience, where have you made mistakes? What's your biggest mistake?
Oh, engaging with audiences on that. I was just going to tell you the mistake of game mistakes that we've made in the past. I mean,
no, we're talking about audience. We want to know about audience.
The biggest mistake that we have had in audience engagement has been to imagine that we should change our game to appeal to new people, and to fall into that trap of thinking if we make it easier or we make it different, then our current fan base could double because we'll open up new territory. And actually that has never worked for us. And the new thinking that we have is that our most hardcore fans, the ones that are like our biggest players and will not stop at this game, if we make them happier, we get more players. And it's not about trying to like listen to the like outliers. It's about saying, what do you love about this game, and let's improve it. So the mistake that we have learned from is that we can't please everybody. In fact, our best games please very few people a lot. And then that enthusiasm kind of like the similar people start to adopt the game, and that's how the trend flows outwards. I don't know. We turned it into a success, but we definitely screwed it up.
What was the game, Evan?
So our last game was Terrarium, and we had to try and think of ways that we could appeal to different people. And now we know that that's not the case. We wanted to make it. We're doubling down on making it the weird, quirky game that we have our most dedicated fans. But we did zig when we should have zagged, and it cost us significant amounts of time that we wish we could have had back. But now we've righted the ship. That's all my metaphors for today.
It sounds like a very good lesson. And Michael, how about yourself?
Oh, I was just going to reiterate and say, Evan, that's a fantastic lesson. And like, I think we know this from film or games or anything, where if you try to make something that pleases everyone, then you end up pleasing no one, and everyone's kind of indifferent to it. So, I'd say, yeah, that's great. Maybe less interesting story, just a distribution mistake. So for the Great Sea, we thought it'd be really exciting to bring it to VR arcades. This is our seated 35-minute VR film. And we thought it'd be great to do kind of like an exclusive window with VR arcades first before, releasing it on Steam and Oculus. And while it was really well-intentioned, we just kind of found out that from an operational standpoint, cinematic VR doesn't work that well in a VR arcade, because it is tough for Nintendo to roll a chair into the booths each time. And that alone probably wouldn't make them, recommend the game. And then yeah, people coming into VR arcades are often people just trying out VR for the first time, right? They don't own a headset at home, so they're just coming in. They want to do probably a multiplayer experience with friends. They want to team up and shoot zombies, or you know, something more interactive and action oriented, and not so much like sit down and watch a VR film. So maybe, you know, so we found other opportunities to distribute that was a much better match for finding the audience who wanted to sit down and watch like a 30-minute movie. And yeah, that's just a quick
So
one.
it's important to be where your audience is, basically, and not expect them to come and find you. And Nyla, how about yourself?
I think that kind of the main is to kind of understand what, and I say this just because I get sometimes pitched a bunch of stuff and or kind of project ideas thrown my way, and I think that certainly things that even for this project that was maybe it should have been a 2D movie, but the thing is that it could have been translated, and this is the project I was referring to earlier, and it could have been translated to a VR experience in a neat way. It involved memories, which I actually think kind of work well in the VR space, and it was this and kind of sorting through memories, but because the director was from a 2D world, because the actors were from 2D spaces, and all of our financing came from the 2D space, it was like, we were just imagining it like a movie, but just in VR. And there was like even someone threw out the idea of combining, what if parts of the story are in VR and parts of it are in 2D, as if it's like, oh, they're gonna just watch the regular movie, and at one point, like if it goes into VR world, they're gonna just like reach under their couch and grab their VR headset that they have and put it on and then watch the rest of the experience, which of course no one would ever do. But this kind of not committing to one side, I think is like is definitely problematic. And I've kind of heard this kind of combo kind of thing mentioned before. And I think that what's so great about these spaces is that it is like a totally different way of telling stories and existing in spaces. And when I was talking about perspective and kind of putting on a perspective, it's when you're watching a 2D movie, you've got these kind of characters and scenes that you're watching, and you're watching it happen to these other people. But when you're in a VR experience, you know, it's like your audience is actually asking, like, who am I? Like, who am I in this space? And so it's a very different kind of way of kind of thinking about it.
You get to give the audience a very different experience than if they were observing. They're participating as opposed to being observers in the situation. So it can be a fair bit more engaging. So we are still without questions. So I think what I'm going to do is does anybody want to make any sort of final comments before we close this off? Otherwise, I will turn over. But Evan, anything you want to say? Michael, Nyla, any other thoughts?
I mean, VR specifically, I would just add that, you know, we are seeing it mature right now. You know, Michael's team at Secret Location has done some huge early pieces when a lot of the devices were just like custom built for these things, and we are just in the last couple of years starting to get to consumer ready products, and even the things about the distribution chain and the storefronts and things are still maturing and shifting. The fact that, like, I can count on one hand the number of VR publishers that really have any legit qualifications to the job shows that, like, this is going to be shifting quite a bit. And so it's an interesting time to be in it, but there aren't a lot of like best practices that are guaranteed at this moment because a lot is being figured out still. And I know that that's not easy to hear, but I can feel the ground shifting as we're making our product right now.
It's the wild, wild west. Change is the only constant. Michael, anything you want to close off saying?
Yeah, just a few words of encouragement that the highest grossing and most profitable game in VR is undoubtedly Beat Saber, which was just made by 3 people. So 2 developers in the Czech Republic who had a great idea, used lightsabers to cut blocks in time to music. and they had that demo, and the CEO of Beat Games found them. He's based in Venice, California. He also composed the original music for the original kind of song list in that game. And I think maybe he could have provided some funding or something like that. But the three of them really together, you know, a kind of CEO, business man with the music, two super talented developers, you know, three of them together made, you know, the biggest hit in VR. So I think it's still early enough days where if you have the concept that, you know, really, you know, just works in VR, you will cut above the clutter. And, you know, there's a Jurassic World game coming out and Splinter Cell and, you know, a lot of exciting IP that's been kind of announced that will be coming to VR. So it is about to get a lot more competitive with kind of more of the traditional companies now that they're taking, you know, VR a little bit more seriously, but there's still time to just do a very VR native idea and have it, you know, be a tremendous hit. Pavlov is another game, you know, made by a single developer, huge hit, highly profitable. So, you know, so if you have a small team with a will and a way and just a fantastic idea, I think, you know, you do have a shot still. So that's the parting words of encouragement.
Great. It's nice to hear some positive messaging, that's for sure. And Nyla, how about yourself? Anything you want to close off saying?
Yeah, just this, I think that it's such an exciting space. And I think that with Toronto, it's a really kind of a neat scene. And in Vancouver, there's like stuff going on in Montreal. I think that it is a kind of a neat space that actually is kind of like a really kind of fun and creative, that really innovative stuff is happening in Canada and in Ontario. That's super exciting. And I'm so this was such a neat conversation. I'm really glad to have been invited.
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. And I'll just say in closing that, yes, you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of some of the challenges and issues of working with digital, and the tip of the iceberg of the industry here too. There's lots of digital first companies operating across the country and in Ontario, and you're seeing 3 representatives from them here. It's a lovely and wonderful community, so continue to engage. I'm sure all of the folks on this chat and everyone in the industry would be happy to answer questions and support people who are maybe somewhat new to this. So I'm going to turn this over back to Katie Elder. So Katie, it's all yours. And again, thank you to our 3 panelists. That was wonderful.
Yes, hi everybody. Thank you everyone for attending our chat today. And also I want to thank Evan, Michael, Nyla, and Kim for sharing their insight today. And another thank you to our partners at Ontario Creates for presenting this session. Let's keep this conversation going on social media, in our communities, and in our work. If you are posting about it on social media, don't forget to tag us in your post at the CDN Academy. And we will follow up with a quick thank you with a survey. So please share your thoughts with us on this digital programming. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to connecting with you in our upcoming events as well. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.